And when you talk about the size of these deliveries, it's insanity. And so we are seeing structural deficits in silver again, which will be the fourth year in a row. And yet the price is being capped, as that capping is incentivizing big players to draw down to the point of 19 million ounces in one day.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for September 2nd through September 9th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we have a very limited supply of backdated silver Australian Kookaburra 10-ounce coins at just $3.10 over spot per ounce. Next, 1-ounce backdated platinum maple leaves are just $80 over spot. And finally, we have compelling pricing on various pre-33 American gold coins. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're always delighted to have this widely popular returning guest. Andy Schectman is the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. He joins us for this weekly market update. We're recording this on Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024 for Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. Andy, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Great to be here, my man. And you know, some things are more important than business, and that would be my 35-year fantasy football league with all my old friends from high school. That is something that is very important to me. And the draft is tomorrow night, so thank you for pivoting and allowing me to record this a day earlier. I know we promised people live streams, but there are just some things I can't miss, and that's one of them. So thank you, and it's of course always good to be back with you.
Well, that's one of the things I think our viewers love about you, Andy, is you're a real guy. So anyway, we certainly understand. Now, I want to get to something. We'll push it off a little bit later. It's about some 3 letters, folks. If you haven't heard these before, you will be hearing more about this. And it's not a good thing, in my view. It's PRT, Pension Risk Transfer. A lot of our viewers are near retirement age or retirement age. A lot of us are of the opinion that we have worked hard all our lives and have a pension built up or a retirement plan. Many of the people of our age think that that is fairly secure and that our retirement is going to be there for us. People, please be aware, pension risk transfer is growing. It is more than doubling each year, and it's companies who had an obligation to their retirees washing their hands of that obligation and handing it off to an insurance company or an immediate cash buyout to the people. And this is a big deal. We're going to talk more about why this is important, why you need to be aware of this trend, and what it may signify as a sign of the times when those who have a lot of eggheads that are studying, there's people who that's their full-time job, is to study risk and to study the markets and to look for when is the time to take shelter. And this is a indication that pensions and the obligations that come with those to employers are being considered to be fully valued at this time and a hot potato going forward. So that's words to the wise. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Andy, first, I wanted to get an update from you on your studies of the COMEX and LBMA deliveries. You've talked to us in the past about record physical deliveries off those exchanges, why that's important and what it signifies. Could you give us an update?
Yeah, I mean, it's been massive. I mean, we've talked a lot about, for example, that the first 6 months of this year, Dunnigan, was the most gold that the central banks have ever bought in a 6-month period, the first 6 months of a year, only surpassing the last 6 months. And of course, the largest buyer over the first 6 months has been Turkey, something I hope to talk with you about here in a few minutes as well. But when we talk about deliveries off of COMEX, we don't know who's taking all of these deliveries. We assume that in some cases they're commercial banks or maybe sovereign wealth funds or whomever it is. And, I have often, or for a long time now, I have been saying that it is the suppression of the Western paper market, where as much as 200 million ounces of gold is traded per day, which is just absolutely ridiculous because, the LBMA says, 20 million ounces or so we trade every day, but that's 10 times understated because we only post the final settlement numbers. The 200 million ounces a day and upwards ends of almost 3 billion ounces of silver, 3.5 times annual global mine supply, is traded in London. It is the suppression of the paper markets where 90% or more of those contracts are paper settled promises, not metal deliveries, but paper settlement, that is creating the distortions in the price and is keeping and has kept a lid on the price, and the rehypothecation that we see on COMEX, which has kept a lid on the price. And maybe that's why we see all of the countries repatriating their gold, taking it away from the Bank of England and the New York Fed, which was typically the access points for COMEX and the LBMA. And so that's already, we understand that. And much like the roll of toilet paper that I've talked about that spins faster and faster and faster, and you begin to see the cardboard, so too has been some of the deliveries we've seen recently. Gold delivered on the August contract so far is about 30% of the registered category, and that's the highest delivery in 4.5 years. Now, the registered category are the bars that back the contracts that are available for delivery. And when you talk about how big it was, I mean, you have to put it in numbers form to really understand. It was 4,142 contracts. Now, if we take 4,142 contracts in one day delivered, multiply that times 100, which is how many ounces are in a contract, obviously that's 414,200 ounces, and let's just call it times $2,500. That's $1,035,500,000. Who's got that kind of money to take possession of $1 billion worth of gold? And that's just in one day. But it's being drawn down from London as well, where in the second quarter, 330 tons or 10.6 million ounces were drawn down. Take 10.6 million and multiply times 2,500, and you're up in stratosphere land. And so you have all of these deliveries in gold, I'll talk about silver next, that are coming off of the exchanges because of the stupidity of the Western system that allows these commercial banks to suppress the price. And maybe they're being told from above. But the thing of it is that when these exchanges were established, long before the countries standing for delivery were coordinated, motivated, sophisticated, and wealthy, they offered a delivery mechanism, which usually never was activated or used. 1% or less of contracts in COMEX would stand for delivery, and now the number's much more. But let's talk about silver, which is crazy, because just a couple of days ago, which would, I believe, be the September contract, we saw 3,830 silver contracts stand for delivery at 5,000 ounces apiece. That's 19,150,000 ounces of silver that were delivered just a couple of days ago. And when you talk about the size of these deliveries, it's insanity. And so we are seeing structural deficits in silver again, which will be the fourth year in a row. And yet the price is being capped, as that capping is incentivizing big players to draw down to the point of 19 million ounces in one day. Now, it's not all one player, but suffice it to say, for an exchange like the COMEX, who had 19 million ounces delivered on the first day of the September contract, to see that happen when no one really ever stood for delivery, it should be very, very, very eye-opening. And to see the same kind of thing on gold should be very, very, very eye-opening. It is the draining of the exchanges that people in the West are ignoring. And this goes right into Zoltan Pozar's belief that he or she who has the commodities wins. So if I admire anything about the way that these countries, and I don't know how much of it is adversarial countries and sovereign wealth funds standing for delivery, and how much is the people in the know here, which I'm sure is a lot. But one thing I do admire about those who are standing for delivery and draining the exchanges is the methodical way in which they're doing it. And they're not doing too much to create Sunday evening news fodder. I mean, heaven forbid they ever talk about gold or gold being drained off of COMEX on the evening news or on Fox or CNBC or whatever, but enough to where it just glides on by, and month after month after month after month, we now see statements from the LBMA saying that they have the lowest amount of silver that they've had since they started keeping records in a 140-year-old exchange. Where's it all going? It's the stupidity of the way we price things, which is then incentivizing people to activate that frequently never or that rarely used clause of standing for delivery that is now becoming a release valve, if you will, and just plundering and draining the exchanges at our expense.
You've pointed out for some time this East-West dichotomy where the Western financial edifice headquartered primarily in United States and Britain. When I spoke with Alistair McLeod earlier this week, he was talking about that and about how they're kind of marching to the same playbook, but the BRICS countries are diverging. They're saying, okay, we're not going to play our little part in that role anymore, our little role in that charade anymore. We're too practical for that. We want real things and we want honest things. So can you talk to us about the latest twist in membership applications for the BRICS, which up till now was considered to be countries which had been by and large outside of the U.S. sphere of influence to some extent?
Yeah, well, we know from the meeting in Novograd a few weeks ago that 59 countries have formally applied, and we don't know which ones they are. We have some ideas. But one thing that did just get publicized on Monday, Bloomberg said that Turkey has formally asked to join BRICS and would be the first NATO member to request membership in the BRICS bloc. Think about that for a moment. And this is a very, very big deal. In fact, I was talking with someone who is a former high-ranking military advisor who I've talked with at length before, and I asked him, do you think Turkey stays in NATO? And he said, no, I don't think so. And now this is supposition, but they asked to join the European Union and they were rejected. And so I think they have doubled down. They're the largest purchaser of gold this year. And in our previous interviews, we've talked about the role of gold in the BRICS, which is the only other tier one asset in the world, and the possibility, at least agreed in principle, of the new unit settlement currency, which will be 40% gold backed, held within the borders of the countries that possess the gold to make the new unit token. And so you see Turkey being the largest producer or the largest accumulator of gold this year, formally requesting admittance into BRICS as a NATO member. Sides are being drawn. Sides are being chosen. And, you know, you got guys like Jim Willey who admittingly, he will say things that I've never heard before. And sometimes they sound outlandish and very often they come true. So I'm not disparaging his sources. But a lot of the sources that he gets, I don't know where he gets some of the info he gets, but some of it's pretty amazing. And he's said things before, like Japan and countries like Australia have interests in joining the BRICS. Now, we don't know that to be official. Haven't heard about it, but there will come a point, done again, where sides must be chosen. And this is one of them, a NATO alliance member, a Western-friendly member. And you just saw it, two naval sailors were just, almost abducted in broad daylight in Turkey yesterday. It's a country that is not maybe as Western friendly as we would like to think, yet they are part of NATO. And for them to choose sides and openly apply to BRICS while massively accumulating gold will tell you, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. They are dropping the crumbs at your feet. I think they are tired of the West. When the European Union turned them down, they would rather stand on their own 2 feet and join a union like the BRICS that is not only cooperative rather than coercive, but that provides them opportunities not found in the Western alliances. So it's a big deal. It's a very big deal. We don't know if they've been approved or anything along those lines, just that they have formally applied. And that is somewhat of the first time we've seen a Western ally, a NATO member, throw their hat in the ring, and where that goes and who it incentivizes to also be courageous enough to throw their hat into the ring. From here, only time will tell. But as the Chinese curse goes, we are certainly living in interesting times. And this is one of the more interesting developments we've seen BRICS related in quite some time.
You've pointed out in the past the tendency of more and more countries, including Saudi Arabia, who had been a staunch ally and partner with the U.S. in the Middle East, turning towards the BRICS. In this case of Turkey, it's hard to forget that during Operation Desert Storm, I remember they said all these U.S. bomber raids and that sort of thing were being launched against Baghdad. From where? From Turkey. There were airfields in Turkey that the U.S. was using to launch those raids. So that's a distinct turnaround for them to be now applying for membership in the BRICS. So that's significant.
Then again, our leaders have done more to destroy our image than any external foe could have ever done in the last several years. And it is a stunning turn of events. But much like everything that is too stupid to be stupid, it was incentivized by our actions and by our policy decisions. And by our monetary decisions and all of the things that are incentivizing these countries to choose sides, to back away from the West. Here again, it's sad, but much like many of the things that are a shock to the system, this is no different.
You mentioned along the way there a structural deficit of silver in the system when you were talking about balances on the exchanges. India has been named as one of the primary importers of silver, huge amounts in the past year. In the first quarter, I think, of this year, importing more than they did all last year, which was a record year, et cetera. Can you talk to us about what's going on with India's import volume of silver?
Yeah, so 2024 will be another deficit, and they imagine 215 million ounce shortfall, second largest in more than 20 years, fourth year in a row of a structural deficit. Of course, the supply demand numbers do not put in military usage, and that's a big deal for me. When we go back to the congressional hearings, Senate hearings, subcommittee hearings in the 40s that I've talked about, I've shown you, that talk about needing 200 million ounces of silver per year in the 40s. Well, we've talked at length about the need for silver in high-tech weaponry, and those supply demand numbers that the Silver Institute publishes, right or wrong, will tell you there's a 215 million ounce deficit on the horizon for this year, the fourth year in a row, but they don't mention anything about military. So my guess is those numbers are much, much higher, and this is why you have 8 brain-dead banks holding the price of silver down. All right, now going to India, it was just reported August 23rd that India's silver imports are on course to nearly double this year, and they're going to double to, the country has already bought 2,295 tons compared to only 673. This was in February alone. In February, 1 month, and they published these numbers months after. In 1 month, they bought 2,295 tons of gold in February, and that's up from 637 months in 637 tons in January. So you're talking a 260% increase month over month. That's massive amount of silver. Putting that in perspective, okay? That amount of silver that they bought in 1 month is 70 million ounces more in silver than the U.S. Mint made in silver eagle coins over the past 3 years combined. So you got India importing more silver in 1 month than the U.S. Mint has made in eagles in 3 years combined. Think about that for a moment. They are estimating that upwards ends of 7,000 tons will be imported this year. And I mean, last year it was 4,554 tons and 560 tons the year before. So 560 jumps up to 4,554, jumps up to 7,000. Their numbers are massive, and they've imported over 700 million ounces in the last few years. That's so much more than is on COMEX and LBMA combined for delivery. It's not even funny. And that's just what they tell us. And as I mentioned to you probably last week in an interview I did with Sean Kunkun from Dolly Varden, he says, look, Andy, China's flying all around Latin America and buying up all the doré and concentrate and shipping it back to China to refine it. How many people know that China is the second largest producer of silver in the world, and now buying concentrate and doré at up to twice what the West will pay for it, shipping it home and refining it, so it doesn't have the transparency or affect the price settlement the way that it would coming off of an exchange? You have these countries using the brain-dead Western suppression against us, draining the exchanges, making massive deliveries across the globe, and now even disintermediating the whole system and going right to the miners and buying their doré. So it's a big deal. I mean, I don't know how much bigger of a deal than I can explain it than to say these countries are every bit as sophisticated or more so than the West. And in fact, they know what we're doing, and we've documented that on all sorts of things that they've said, like the head of the Shanghai Exchange in 2015 saying, when China is allowed to speak at the gold table, the real price will be observed. Or the BRICS grain exchange saying we produce more grain than the West, but we can't control the price. It's done on COMEX. That will change now with the BRICS grain exchange. They know what we're doing to the world's commodities. They know we're suppressing them. So instead of raising a fuss about it, they're just draining it and buying it everywhere and anywhere they can, even in unrefined form. And it goes right past the watching eye of the mainstream. It goes right past the watching eye of Wall Street. And you got to come to Liberty and Finance to find that. It's just a joke. but it elevates what we're talking about to supreme importance, because you can't get out of the way of what you don't see coming. And in this case, you can't take advantage of what could be a once in a generation shift unless you know it's shifting. And indeed, by the actions of these countries, it's shifting. The amount of deliveries that we are seeing is so unprecedented, it's not even funny. And it will get to a point where at some point, the exchanges that have grown to be accepted for up to 140 years, the LBMA and the COMEX in 74, will be rendered the same way Bernie Madoff was, as a scam and as a Ponzi scheme. And the Shanghai Metals Exchange, which has increased over 200% in volume in the past several months, has now surpassed in trading volume the COMEX. So these little by little moments are becoming far more legitimate, and it baffles me how underestimating this is really, how the mainstream underestimates it, how Wall Street underestimates it or completely ignores it. I think this is a massive deal, a huge deal, and all you got to do is not listen to what people are saying, but do what the biggest money in the world is doing, those who know the playbook, and that is accumulating commodities, period. Selling treasuries, selling dollars, getting out of the way of what's coming, and buying commodities, which have, as we know, no counterparty risk when held in your own possession.
I just wanted to jump in here with my story about pension risk transfer, PRT, because when you talk about those who are the best informed and the deepest pockets getting out of the way of what others don't even see coming, I want people to be aware of the rampant growth of pension risk transfer as an industry. What that means is that companies which forever, from the beginning of time pretty much, that's the Kodak and 3M and Target and Verizon and Jim Beam and on and on and on, are dropping like a hot potato their pension plans. No longer will they be obligated to maintain the defined benefits that they've promised to their retirees, but they're dumping that on the side. And in many cases, people have a choice of a one-time buyout, or they can go with an annuity that's been handed off to an insurance company. And some people have talked about this, said, well, at least there's big insurance companies such as MetLife or whatever, they're taking over the obligations here. Well, at least it's big deep pockets and big carrying hands that can carry that weight. I just want to remind us all that back in the global financial collapse of 2008, AIG, the third largest bankruptcy of an insurance company in the history, happened. And because of all the underwater mortgage loans, this time it's not maybe mortgages that are underwater. It's that after 40 years of rising stock markets, as you've warned us, there's a tidal change, a sea change in the markets. And the next decade is not going to look like the last decade. And all those financial planners and advisors that are telling people just stay in the market and buy the dips and ride things out and everything will be just fine, because it always has been, always meaning the last 40 years of a falling interest rate regime. And they're leading people like sheep. And I'm very concerned, and we have been forever on Liberty and Finance about, and before that, Reluctant Preppers, about the welfare of ordinary mom and pop earners, savers, retirees. And we want to make sure that people are aware that this is a huge megatrend. Just to throw out a few numbers here, this is just Q1 numbers of 2022, 2023, and 2024. So quarter one, the last 3 years in a row, the size of how many of these pension have been offloaded onto insurance companies or spun out into annuities, and basically companies saying we're not going to be obligated anymore to our retirees. $2.7 billion in Q1 of 22, $6.3 billion in Q1 of 23. That's more than double. $14.2 billion the first quarter of this year. That's again more than double. So more than doubling 3 years in a row. And those are just single quarter numbers. So we're on track to be way more than 60 billion this year in these pension plans that are being handed off to third party, either insurers or annuity companies. And here's a quote from about the bankruptcy of the AIG case. AIG was bailed out by the American Federal Reserve, which had to intervene on various occasions to inject the total amount of $205 billion US. So that was what happened in the global financial collapse. A lot of people lost their homes, and my concern is now a lot of people are going to lose their pensions if they think that the ultimate backstop is going to be this, MetLife or some insurance company, because their company, and to me, it's a vote by those very well informed who hire tons of people that study aging and life expectancy and markets and all that. These companies are saying, we've done well. Our pension plan has flourished, but we don't see that the seas ahead look like the ones we've been navigating. We don't want to be in this business anymore. We're getting out. So if the pension managers are getting out and the companies that back them are getting out, mightn't it be a good time for mom and pops to consider taking those buyouts in cash and putting them into something that is permanent and that is lasting and that holds value and that protects you from destruction of your retirement? And we know what's happening to the dollar. We know the risk that the banks are facing. So it's an option to seriously consider whether it's the right time to take that pension plan that the companies are dropping like a hot potato and instead put it into something solid that's going to last and stand the test of time. Your thoughts on that, Andy? Because I know you've been researching it as well.
Yeah, I mean, just in the numbers that you mentioned from quarter one 23 to quarter one 2024, that's about 130% increase. And that goes to show that the transferring of these liabilities to insurance companies is a byproduct of the environment of uncertain economic times, inflationary pressures, geopolitical pressures, stupidity of our leadership, the end of the era of low interest rates, perhaps. I mean, we're not ever going back to zero bound. If we do, this country's dead. But, these are the quandaries that are facing these pension administrators. And you're right, they typically will give those pensions to insurance companies. And, I think it becomes very concerning to me when you realize that, these insurance companies are loaded with things like treasuries. And what happens to their ability to AIG was a reinsurer, if I'm not mistaken, and they reinsure the insurance companies. They're the ones who are insuring the insurance companies because it would lead to a systemic failure if rates were to spike, as we've talked about before, if all of a sudden the dollar was dumped, Operation Sandman, or they end up saying in October, we're going to issue the unit like we've talked about. It's not just in theory and in principle, but it's real. And now the need to hold dollars in treasuries wanes and they get dumped. And so the Federal Reserve is the only one dumb enough to buy them, which leads to hyperinflation. But this is the kind of nonsense that these pension administrators are thinking about. And it becomes a little concerning when you realize that all of these annuity contracts are issued in a small number of insurers. And you're talking about massive systemic risk where, you got a handful of the very biggest insurers who are, I'll take this huge lump sum. That's amazing. And I'll take on your liability. Well, why do you think the pensions are getting out of it? Because the actuarials and the numbers that they've used really don't, they're concerned about going forward. People are living longer and it's harder to go out into the future and to make these returns and to feel safe about guaranteeing them. So they're offloading the liability to the insurance companies and washing their hands of it. But, when we talk about insurance companies in the United States, I don't know how many have failed in the last 20, 30 years, but the number's got to be close to 100, I would think. Insurance companies fail too. And in a rising interest rate environment, when you see these companies have been loaded or are typically loaded up on treasuries, in an environment where treasuries are becoming more dangerous, this whole thing, it's a powder keg. It truly is a powder keg waiting to happen. And I just think it's wise of these companies to offload this responsibility. But I think it puts a target on the insurance industry and makes the insurance industry one that is, again, arguably very over-leveraged and undercapitalized to maintain these lofty expectations. And if something happens in the economy that disrupts their normal course of business, what happens to all of these pensions? Does this go bye-bye? I'm not sure, but I think that when people have the choice, they're either given a lump sum or an annuity. Well, with a lump sum, now you're forced to managing it yourself. And all of this money you thought about for retirement, you now have to manage. Yeah, you could put that into gold. But now you have the quandary. It used to be you knew your retirement was safe and secure and you were set. And now you're thinking, geez, I got to manage this myself. I don't know how to do that. What am I going to do? Do I put it in bad things? Do I put it in the stock market right before it crashed? Don't know. Or I can get an annuity cut off of an insurance company that, I would argue, I have said for the last year or two, insurance companies are square in the target of a reset. If you see interest rates spike because of a dollar dump, if you think the insurance companies are scot-free, safe-free, safe from all of that, I got a bridge to sell you. It ain't going to happen because they are loaded up with treasuries. They are very interest rate sensitive. So it's a dangerous thing, but what it is, it's an indictment of the system. These people running the pensions, they're actuarials, they're smart, they see where things are going, they see the trends, and the fact that you see 130% increase year over year. One of my very dearest friends, he's about 10 years older than me, but he was an executive at International Paper for a long time and has an amazing pension where he gets like $130 or $40 or $50,000 every single year. And if he dies, his wife gets it. I mean, it's crazy, but I remember him telling me, I don't know how many years ago, 7, 8 years ago, that he was the last year IP stopped doing pensions a while ago because these companies know. I mean, look at the pensions, the underfunding of pensions all around the world, all around the country, rather, in municipalities, in cities, and in corporations. It will lead to the downfall. Look at the police and fire and the teacher pension in Chicago. I mean, it's like 50 cents on the dollar funded. So pensions are a big problem, and to see them offloaded to insurance companies is only very logical, but it's an indictment of the system, and I think it makes the insurance companies who hold it that much more risky, if you will, from a forward-looking perspective.
Yeah, just to put a little teeth behind your swag about how many insurance companies are failing, the point is it's rapidly increasing. There was one American insurance company failed in 2021, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them in 2022, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them in 2023, and only in the first month of 2024, there were already 2. So it's rapidly increasing.
Yeah, so I mean, you think that's safe? And think of the angst that it creates for the employee who based his whole life upon this pension being there, and now you just disrupted his or her whole world. It's a scary thing, but expect more of these types of actions. And I guarantee you, the minute it's done, the company says, "Oh, thank goodness that's over with," because we were potentially in a lot of trouble here. And I just think in an environment that's going to become increasingly difficult to find returns, that aren't being eroded by inflation for sure, but in returns at all, it's very dangerous. So, insurance companies, which are typically safe and secure and thought of that way, I don't feel that way about. So it gives me anxiety even thinking about it.
There's a lot of things in our financial lives that we realize we're not standing on firm ground anymore. And part of that's, as Gregory Manarino points out, because we haven't been standing on constitutional currency. We're supposed to have gold and silver as our currency, and we haven't had that for a long time. But what are we offering in terms of real things this week for specials for people to consider?
Yeah, would you tell Gregory, I know he moved to Florida, that I would love to drive anywhere in Florida and take the dude out to lunch. I love him. He's just so fun to watch. Tell him he has my respect and admiration, and I know he knows who I am. I know who he is, and it's about time that I get to meet the guy. So say hi to him for me and tell him I'm a big fan. As far as what we have today, I love these coins. They are 10-ounce kookaburras. They're incredible. They're about the size of a hockey puck. And I love them. And I will often, on special occasions, special gifts, I'll give them as gifts. I gave one for a drawing at the Rick, at the Rick Rule conference in Boca here recently. They are very wowing, very, very wowing. When you take a look at them, you're like, wow, those are amazing. A 10-ounce kookaburra, and they are $3.10 over spot. While supplies last. They're amazing. I'm serious. They're super cool. And then we also have the platinum maple leafs again. Platinum's a very interesting thing. Done again, it presents a similar argument to silver, massively out of whack historically. It doesn't quite have the oomph behind it that silver does in terms of its supply and its demand. But look, the majority of the platinum mine comes from South Africa and Russia. So it's a situation where there is a supply-demand imbalance. There is an imbalance between gold and platinum and their prices. It's very attractive to me. I know Rick Rule really likes it. Platinum right now at $80 over spot. The 1-ounce platinum maple leaf is a really great choice. And look, the truth of it is that for the last decade almost, platinum has been as rare as hen's teeth in this industry. Where it's almost impossible to find U.S. Eagle platinum coins. They issue very small quantities, 50,000, 40,000, 70,000, 100,000, whatever the number is. You got to buy it immediately the day that they offer them from the mint, and then they're gone. And often, like they say, there is no bull market like a metals bull market. No one wants to sell and go back into fiat. So although these are backdates, there are some people that sell current date gold, platinum maples and platinum eagles are really something we don't see that often these days. And when we do, they go quick. If you're looking to buy platinum, this is as good of a choice as you'll find price-wise and product-wise, the maple leaf being obviously one of my two favorite choices. Love it. But I will tell you, if you're looking for something in silver that you want to have, obviously for your own portfolio, but maybe you have a wedding to go to or graduation or a very special birthday, they are a showstopper. People love them. And I can't say how much I love them. In fact, no, I don't have.
Well, while you're searching around, I'm going to do a spoiler alert because I just interviewed Rick today, and I asked him other natural resources other than gold or silver that he favors going forward. He mentioned the platinum group metals. He thought,
I knew he liked it, and it is. I mean, it's amazing value. It's mathematically distorted. Rick is a math guy, a logic guy. From a logical perspective, both silver and platinum say the same thing, that it's an anomaly, historical anomaly in not only geologic terms, but also in price terms. And when I look at the success I've had in large trades over 34 years, I can think of 4 or 5 really big ones where I called everyone I knew and every client and said, you got to think about this. You got to do it. Every one of them centered around identification and exploitation of price anomalies. Again, done again, like I always say, I can't thank you enough for letting me be a part of what you're doing. You interview some of the best names in the world, and I'm very flattered to be one of the names that gets to associate myself with those names. It means a lot to me. You're the best in the business, and I hope you and everyone else out there has a wonderful, wonderful rest of your evening. I suppose you'll be watching this tomorrow night, Wednesday night. I hope you all root for my fantasy football team, which I will be drafting with the darn 10th pick in a 10 league team. But that's okay because I will win it this year with the last pick. And I look forward to picking up where we left off on a live stream next week, Wednesday.
Well, thanks to everyone for being here, and we'll see you all next week on Wednesday for the live stream. Andy, thanks for joining us on Liberty and Finance.
You got it, my man. All the best to you.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for September 2nd through September 9th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we have a very limited supply of backdated silver Australian Kookaburra 10-ounce coins at just $3.10 over spot per ounce. Next, 1-ounce backdated platinum maple leaves are just $80 over spot. And finally, we have compelling pricing on various pre-33 American gold coins. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.